try and build rather than repeat some of the points. Some of the key messages that I'm looking to focus on are, which in my opinion are the two big challenges that our retirement space faces. One is just weak coverage and the impact on fiscal costs. The second bit is around the fact that the accumulation phase and the design of the accumulation phase results in not adequate corpus. So, one thing is a coverage issue. Second is the adequacy issue. And if you think about those two, they become very fundamental to building a long-term sustainable retirement model. I'll touch upon some of the global learnings, especially related to these two areas, and then talk about a few things that can be looked at in the Indian context as well. So, why is coverage such a big issue? To my mind, it's a combination of a social fabric evolution process and an economic understanding historical situation. I think we often forget that India was all about joint families, and with urbanization and with nuclear families, that system is going away, and not going away slowly, but going away very fast. So if you think about your parents, your grandparents, it was all about the children supporting them. So, retirement was never top of mind as a concern. It was almost treated as something that has to happen, and nobody did anything about it. Cut to today, and this is a number where the average households come down from 5 to 4.3. I was reading some new data. Last year, it's probably almost at 3, so it's coming down very fast. The second thing is, it's been spoken about a couple of times around the fact that 2/3 of India's savings is gold and real estate. That's, even today, I think, forget, our generation. Even if you think about the top two priorities for the younger workforce, roof over the head is a big one. And even with that being so topical, we know how sort of under-penetrated that segment is. So, it comes down to this big debate. Is really real estate a good thing or a bad thing, given the numbers? The problem is, it's not treated as a roof over the head issue, it's treated as an investment allocation thing. And that's where the whole argument, I think, comes apart. The other issue is around how much money goes into gold, because historically, every family said, or, it's about my daughter's son getting married, so I have to invest in gold. If you look at yields of these two asset classes, forget the past, but look at forward, the likelihood of them even beating inflation looks tough. And that itself, poses the big question. Shouldn't we as a nation, be thinking of ways to monetize it? And if indeed retirement or the retirement pool or the retirement space is such a significant part of the financial system, why is it only being spoken about from the context of reverse mortgage when it comes to real estate or homes? Why is it being talked of only, a monetization issue and therefore gold bonds? Why isn't it being looked at from a retirement lens? And then finally, it's around education. I think in NPS, we have a great start, a great product. But how many people know about it? I think that's a very big issue. Then when we think about coverage, and this has been spoken, and you put it very nicely, Professor, India, China, and the United States will look the same as far as old age goes. I think, the numbers are very, very stark. 12 in 1 are today, people are above 60. And by 2050, it would be 5 in 1. I mean, that number is scary. And to add to it, just the male-female ratio and the whole angle around survivor benefit, I think is a big deal. And today, we just don't talk about it. And then when we think about sustainability, it does throw up a number of questions. Clearly, the fiscal cost of not having an effective system, because only 8% of private sector is covered. The number on government is little better. And this tells its own story, because if the social safety net is not built by 2050, the burden will move from 2.2% to 3.9% of GDP. That's a very big number. On the other hand, because the government system historically had the EPS and now the NPS, actually, the reduction in the pension burden because of this move is actually, you know, 0.7 from 2.2. I think these are very, very big numbers. And it almost tells you as a sense of urgency, and this is going back to the point on cooperative, that it is a material agenda for the government, and we had our minister say that, regulators, and I would go ahead to say when we talk about market, we should almost say all segments of the market. You know, it's the banks, it's the pension funds, it's the mutual funds, it's the distribution fraternity, it's the non-banks, and, you know, the whole cooperative framework, because if this is the kind of fiscal cost, if this is not addressed, then forget having a robust enough allocation for all the other things that we need as a nation. And then, you know, the other challenge around adequacy of corpus. You know, the challenge we have that, you know, while the Provident Fund contribution system is very old, you know, apart from the fact that it really covers only the organized sector, the payouts are very, very low because of the fact that a large part is in fixed income. India historically has been a double-digit inflation economy. So where have there been real returns? And the recent survey actually talks about the average pension per person under EPS at only around 23,000 rupees. I mean, imagine, what is that going to do from covering, you know, forget meeting standard of living. It's about just covering healthcare costs. And we all know that health issues grow magnifold as age increases. And on the you know, DC side, if I think about EPFO and how much is biased towards government securities and then bonds, and how little is towards equity, it tells its own story. On NPS, it's really, you know, a bit baffling why government plans should be only 15% equity. Not sure. I mean, is that because we've taken a position on the risk profile of a government employee? Really don't know. And all of this means real returns to subscribers are very low. So what are some of the global learnings? You know, this is a complicated chart, but this is the chart on developed markets. It's got the top 15 countries based on assets under pension, not overall asset management. And it simply says that by and large, you have at least 50% go to assets other than fixed income. An average of 26% goes to equity. And actually, the countries that have really provided material real return to their subscribers are those which have around 50% in equities. And what stands out is actually the US, UK, Australia, and the returns over 5 years. We all know the 5-year returns world over have been the pits. I mean, we all know what has happened to interest rates, right? And if a market like the UK over just the last 5 years, which is, you know, not the best of economic cycles, is able to deliver double digit on nominal and 8.4 on real returns, I think that's something to think about. And then, you know, we talk about India being a fast-growing economy, and then we say, okay, and that's why, you know, Minister of State kept talking about the best of times and the worst of times. I think the key question is, what are we doing about it? You know, we might argue that that's developed markets. That's not the same story for developing countries. Developing countries, again, top 15, the story is very similar. And if you look at the markets that have done very well, you know, despite very, very volatile situation, you know, all that is happening on China does impact, you know, the near-term returns. But end of the day, we're talking about point in time. Professor made a very good point. Pension is about 75 years. 75 years is roughly 14 business cycles. All your ups and downs will get evened out. So the question to ask is, are we being driven by fear, or are we being driven by actual economics? So, I just point out 3 case studies, and each one for very different reasons. I point out the experience of the United States with the introduction of the 401k plan. It dramatically changed the landscape of financial inclusion, and today 1 in 2 Americans have some form of a 401k or an IRA. And the simple step they took was to make it an auto-enrollment program. Today, none of our programs are auto-enrollment. Then, we have to ask ourselves, if it's not auto-enrollment, then how are we going to increase coverage? Then, if one thinks about Chile and what it did, they did have, the whole Provident Fund kind of system. But it is when they introduced individual capitalization accounts and they had a much more open environment where they allowed time for transition, the fact that the individual capitalization account very sharply addressed the unorganized, the self-employed sector, it's made a dramatic difference. And then over time, there was a lot of innovation around products, and investment options started getting tailored to the risk profile and the type of the subscriber, rather than, one brush paints all kind of a mechanism. And then, Hong Kong. And Hong Kong just introduced it in 2000. And if one looks at the coverage of Hong Kong, it's growing at 20% per year. And it has made a dramatic difference to pension coverage. And, it has a big aging issue as well, and a longevity issue as well. So, people are aging faster and they're living longer, and therefore they've really, at a very, very rapid pace in the MPF, moved to a mandatory enrollment process. And the government and the regulator, made the whole investor education program by far the single biggest campaign that they ran for several years. So in the context of India, what are perhaps some of the things we could look at? So I think the big need is around coverage. And when I think about coverage, if we can move to an auto-enrollment, I think the organized sector will get dealt with quite nicely. But that's not going to address all of the challenge. It is about the unorganized. And I completely agree, it's not about lumping it under one number of 70, 80% or whatever it might be. I think there has to be a very, very different approach to pension plans. It has to keep in mind the construct of India. Okay, the fact, we should not assume that the farmer does not need a pension plan, right? And if you think about the farmer, and when a farmer raises his maximum money, it's post-harvest. And today, even if we want the farmer to enroll in the NPS, how is the farmer going to meet a monthly contribution? Why is it we don't have a flexible design which actually works right at the village level with the Jila Parishads, with the Gram Panchayats, to have a scheme that allows them 1 or 2 times a year, timing it with harvest, to deposit flexible sums? I'm sure if we move down the path, that segment can be covered. And then, talking about having the same kind of asset allocation for all government employees, or not distinguishing between a household or a subscriber that is able to only do maybe 2,000 rupees versus somebody who can do 100,000. And just even based on simple things like age and ability to save and ability to invest, really open up the investment avenues, go more aggressive, for example, on equities. Why not look at ways of monetizing the real estate and asking for the real estate and gold to become contributions into the scheme? If it could be done from a reverse mortgage point of view, and the thought process was pension. The whole thought behind reverse mortgage was exactly that. But somewhere that's not, part of the whole plan. It's today not part of the thought leadership agenda. And then I'd say that, it's not only about the privileged. It's very important to really think more and more around what more can be done with the Atal Pension Yojana, and how can a holistic approach be taken on moving ahead on inclusion from a pension sector point of view, and adding an allocation for health, for example. Throwing in some of the, actually looking at an option to take a bundled service and an unbundled service. And I think working with many, many more influencers in the system. I was talking to somebody that even for somebody like me, I opened my NPS account last year. One bank turned me down. The second bank showed no interest. My financial advisor couldn't care less. I finally had to say, listen, I'm going to shut my bank account if you don't open it. Now, we're talking of somebody who probably understands this. But what about the rest? And therefore, the need to really have a formal distribution plan, I think, is very, very critical. Because if we have the best of design and we don't have education, we don't have distribution, I think the plot is going to fail. If I think about some of the regulatory changes and fiscal incentives, I think the transition from EPS to NPS is something to think about. I think, the EEE regime for NPS is something that comes up very often, but, we haven't seen the move. And that itself might deal with a lot, I think, from a mindset perspective, as far as people who are looking at this as an option goes. And finally, it's about inflation. The higher the inflation, the lower the amount to set aside. And therefore, very, very, it's really applaudable to see that, inflation control is on the RBI, the government agenda. And, I can't sort of emphasize on this any sort of less. It's a point that is very, very important. I think incentives, often I've found that incentives are looked at as a four-letter word. Somewhere we tend to believe that incentives come at the cost of the subscriber in this case, or at the cost of an investor, more broadly speaking. It's like saying you have, the best, if you look at somebody who is really thirsty, and you tell him that the well or the pond is there, but there is no road. Of what use is that information, or of what use is that capability? So, this agenda has been coming up for a long time. And I'd say, a two-tier approach, one which focuses on the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, and really makes widespread distribution possible, is very important. And where you look at better financial literacy, which is the tier 1, you could look at a different system on this. There are examples of other financial services industries, both insurance and mutual fund, that have done very well on this. And I would sort of also remind everybody that if one thinks about the banking sector and thinks about priority sector lending and the role it has had as far as financial inclusion goes, I think it's a big deal. And it was mandatory. So somewhere we need to rethink this whole agenda. And then I would say it's all about asset allocation, multiple asset classes. Yes, there is talk about REITs, InvITs, and what have you. But is any money going there? So I'd like to close on this note of saying that we have to deal with coverage. We have to deal about making the accumulation phase a very material phase, relook at asset allocation, certainly have a much better strategy around distribution, education, incentives, and finally design. So thank you very much. I hope this has been useful.